Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's TIA live stream. We're very excited for you to join us today and to hear our presentation with our guest speaker, Mr. Keith Peterson, who will be introducing himself further shortly. My name is Anthony. I'm the Senior Education Manager here at TIA, as well as the host for today's event. We have a few housekeeping items to get through before we get started. First up, we're going to start with the TIA antitrust statement. Discussion, comments, and presentations during TIA functions must not refer to any past, present, or future rates, prices, or anything related thereto. Include any reference to marketing strategies, include any discussion of boycotts of any person, product, or firm, or inhibit any members' employees from discussing employment with other member companies. Additionally, things you hear during the meeting that are confidential and private to TIA should not be shared publicly without its prior consent or used against or in competition with TIA. Next up, for questions during the session, we have some options for you to choose from. Wherever you are watching this, feel free to put in the comments your question or anything you'd like us to address, or anything you'd like us to talk about further if we haven't gotten to it yet. Anything like that, feel free to put it in the comments. We love to, get this as interactive as possible. Additionally, if you don't feel comfortable commenting or putting your message out there in the public, you can send us an email to education@tianet.org with the subject live stream, and we will aim to get to your question as they come in. With that said, if you do have any questions about TIA or some TIA resources, please contact info@tianet.org. When you want to come back and review this recording, you can again come back to wherever you are viewing this, whether that's on LinkedIn or YouTube. We also have the TI podcast, so this will be available audio only on Spotify. And you can also, wherever you are viewing that recording, view other past live streams through the TI account right there. But also in the TI LinkedIn account, if you hit events, you can see future events and past events. The same goes for YouTube. So be sure to follow the TI LinkedIn and YouTube for upcoming live streams, and visit tianet.org to check out member resources, some of which we might be discussing today. Especially if you're listening to this through the podcast, we'd love to hear more from you on one of these live in the future. With that said, I'm going to bring on our speaker, Mr. Keith Peterson. Hey, Keith, how are you?
Good. How are you doing today, Anthony?
Good, thanks. Thanks for joining us. Bear with me as I bring up your slides. And with that, Keith, I will turn it over to you, sir.
All right. Thank you very much. And thank you to TIA for having me on today to talk about what we're doing at what we call the Digital Standards Development Council. Now, that's a mouthful, so I'm just going to call it DSDC going forward here. Now, just kind of overall, when we think about digital connections, and what we're doing at the DSDC, it's not just about APIs, really. What we're really working on is creating the digital foundation for the future of freight. Now, freight still moves through a mix of emails, phone calls, portals, PDFs, EDIs, custom integrations, and manual follow-up. Those tools have helped the industry function, but too much time is still spent translating information between systems instead of acting on it. When we say digital connections, real results, the important word is really connections. It's not enough for one company to be digital inside its own walls. The value of this really comes when partners can exchange information on a consistent, structured, and near real-time way. The standards we create only matter when they're used. The goal today is for me to explain to you what we've done at the DSDC and also show why the industry needs to adopt these standards. And of course, this can't be a discussion around APIs and technology without mentioning AI. AI really raises the stakes for people here. AI can help with planning, visibility, exception management, fraud detection, pricing, and customer communication. But you can't reach that potential for AI if the data is fragmented, inconsistent, or delayed. So let's start by talking about who I am, and then we'll go on to who's doing this work and who's behind it, and then we'll go on to why it really matters. So number one, I'm Keith Peterson. I'm Vice President of Operations at NMFTA, and part of my job as well is to be the DSDC liaison for the NMFTA. My role as liaison is really about connecting the dots between people doing the operational work every day and the standards that can make those processes easier, faster, and more scalable. I'm not here to talk about technology for technology's sake. I'm not that guy here. I'm here because the logistics process itself needs to become more connected and more digital. Everybody knows the pain points of this process. There's duplicate entry, there's missing information, status uncertainty, custom integrations, long onboarding cycles, and exceptions that don't surface until they're already a problem. The standards become useful when they help solve some of these real operational problems. And that's why industry participation matters. We've pulled together shippers, carriers, brokers, 3PLs, and technology providers so the standards that we work on reflect how freight actually moves. Now, let's talk about what the DSDC, what we really set out for it to do here. So the DSDC exists because the industry needs a common way for systems to communicate. Every company within the process has data, but we don't always describe it the same way or structure it the same way or even send it the same way. API standardization gives us a shared language. It tells systems what information is needed, how it should be structured, and what events matter, as well as how a system should respond to another. Now, this isn't about forcing everyone to get onto the same platform or a certain platform. What we're really trying to do is allow different platforms to work together in order to solve these issues. And I want to be real clear, right? I am not against EDI, and the DSDC is not against EDI. EDI has been foundational for the logistics industry and has standardized many important transactions. As a point of fact, anytime we're discussing any kind of new standards or even looking at the current ones that we've developed, EDI always comes into the conversation in a way that, hey, how has EDI done it? Because that's what people are used to. It's really valuable and powerful. The main difference now is that the industry now needs more real-time interaction. And EDI was very good at structured transaction, but APIs allow systems to interact as events happen. We need clean, consistent, structured data in order to help one interaction trigger another. So it's that full digital process that we've been really kind of pushing on here. And what's really important is that as we go through and build these standards, it's not being built in isolation. It's really an industry collaboration. So, I wanted to point out who's involved in this collaboration, because again, we're not just doing this in a vacuum. This slide matters because it shows that the standards are being developed by the industry and for the industry. You see on this slide, there's actually two councils. There's a truckload and an LTL council. And we'll kind of get into the difference of those in just a moment. But for anybody involved in truckload and LTL, you know that there are pretty big differences between how they operate and exchange data here. Freight transportation really has so many connection points that any one company cannot solve all these issues on its own here. So a shipper may work with many carriers. Brokers and 3PLs sit in the middle of many of those relationships. Carriers receive requests from a lot of different platforms, and technology providers are asked to support countless different variations. This is precisely why collaboration matters. Standards only work when they represent the needs of the broader ecosystem. The DSDC has brought together stakeholders across truckload and LTL to identify the most important workflows, define common requirements, and begin building standards around the full shipment lifecycle. This has moved beyond asking whether standards are needed and now focused on actual business processes, data needs, and API interactions. The next step here is really broader adoption. And it's really important for participation in this work here and to get feedback from the industry about what may be working and what may not be working. So let's look at first, let's start with really what the Full Truckload Council has done. When we look at what the Full Truckload has done, the important thing is to look at the sequence. These are not random API ideas. They wanted to focus in on what they called really that quote to cash, the life cycle of a shipment. Rate quote, book and tender, EBOL, in-transit visibility, scheduling, and invoice and documentation. We look at this shipment process from beginning to end. Each step creates information that the next step needs. So book and tender helps define how a shipment commitment is created and communicated. EBOL creates the digital shipment foundation. In-transit visibility creates the event timeline while that shipment is in process. And then invoice and documentation closes the loop by standardizing the transfer of that invoice data and supporting documents. So overall, the power is not just from one standard, the power is in connecting them. The future state is an event-driven logistics process where one digital event triggers the next digital action. Once a tender is accepted, the shipment identifier can flow to the EBOL. The EBOL is created, that same identifier can support visibility. Once delivery occurs, the documentation and invoice process can connect back to that same shipment record. If we adopt the same standards, we reduce friction every time two companies need to connect. It's about getting that time to value that much shorter. And what's important is that there's a real rise in AI right now. There's a lot of different applications using it, TMSs, and so it is here. AI cannot really reliably predict delays, recommend actions, or automate exception management if it cannot trust the shipment identifiers, event definitions, timestamps, and status updates. What we're doing with these standards goes beyond just the APIs. It's trying to drive standardization in how we term things so that it really helps shorten that time of making those connections between two partners. And these standards create the structured data foundation that AI needs. Now, this work isn't limited to truckload. LTL has its own complexity as well here. Shipment consolidation, pro numbers, freight classification, multiple stops, accessorials, claims, document retrieval, and rating complexity. All this is why standards matter so much. The more complex the process, the more valuable it is to have shared definitions and shared expectations. Many companies operate across both full truckload and LTL. If the standards are completely disconnected by mode, the industry creates new silos. DSDC is working to respect mode-specific differences while still aligning a lot of the terminology and data concepts where it makes sense. So the LTL Council has already worked through critical standards like EVOL. In-transit visibility is coming out soon. Preliminary freight charges, pickup requests, and visibility. Those efforts are informing the other DSDC work that's going on so that we don't recreate standards in a vacuum here. So this, it's been a lot of work. It's been a couple of years of work just to even get to this point. So what does all this actually do for the industry? So next, let's talk about the benefits of adopting these standards here. One of the main benefits that I always come to first is common language. This means systems can communicate without every connection being a custom project. Today, too much of our industry still depends on one-off integrations. Every new partner can mean a new mapping exercise, new exception process, new onboarding cycle, and a new support burden. Standardization is meant to reduce that friction. It doesn't eliminate the need for professional services integration work, but it does give everyone a shared starting point. For brokers and 3PLs, standards can reduce the cost and complexity of scaling those relationships. Carriers can look to it to reduce custom requests and create a clearer path to support more customers digitally. Shippers can look at it as creating more consistent data from their provider network, and technology providers can make it possible to build towards one shared model instead of constant custom variations. And then when we think about a digital first process, we're talking about shipment information that is created digitally, shared digitally, updated digitally, and used digitally across the entire life cycle. Again, triggering one digital interaction creates the next action time and time again. And this isn't about just replacing paper with a PDF. A PDF may be electronic, but it's not necessarily useful data. Digital first means the data is structured and machine readable. And once the data is digital and standardized, we can automate those workflows, create a single source of truth, improve visibility, and move faster when something changes or when exceptions happen. AI isn't magic. AI needs data. The best AI outcomes will come from data that is standardized, real-time, and connected across the shipment life cycle. If every carrier is sending pickup event differently, and every broker stores status codes differently, and every shipper defines exceptions differently, AI has to spend its energy normalizing all that noise and trying to bring it together. Standards reduce that noise. And then that allows AI to bring predictive ETAs, proactive exception alerts, smarter tendering, better routing decisions, improved invoice validation, faster claim support, and better customer communication. But we need a reliable digital foundation in order to do this. Adoption turns these standards from a document into actual business value. And as more companies adopt, and the more valuable the standard becomes for everyone. And that really kind of brings us to our next important step here, which is really adoption of these. So keep in mind, this is likely the most important slide of this presentation. We can create the best standards in the world, but they only matter if people adopt them. And adoption doesn't mean doing everything at once. It means companies need to start putting these standards into their roadmap. So, this isn't just about APIs. It's about digitizing the entire shipment process. An API can't solve the problem if the underlying data is still trapped on paper, email, PDFs, or inconsistent internal fields here. Organizations need to work this into their development cycles. That means planning for standards, budgeting for the standards, and asking vendors and their partners to help support these standards. Let's be honest, if it's not on the roadmap, it's not going to happen. So it's something to start looking at well ahead of time here. And when I talk to technology partners, of course, they want the market to demand it, and that's what's going to make it into their roadmap here, which makes absolute sense. So as shippers, brokers, carriers, 3PLs all ask for these standards, technology partners will need to work them into their roadmaps and start adopting them as well. Now, there's a lot of carriers out there that, and a lot of organizations that don't have their own development groups here or, departments. There's a lot of larger ones that can have floors of people that are just there to work on development. But, there's many more that don't have that large IT team. And that's really why we need our technology partners to adopt these, so that the value of these tools, the standard workflow, these connectors can be brought down to all the carriers within the process here, carriers and their partners as well here. So what I suggest to people is pick one workflow where the integration pain is high. Compare the current process and the data to the DSDC standard. And then ask, take a look at it. Can you make the changes yourself? Can you talk to your technology provider, your partner, about how they plan to support these APIs? And then in the end, pilot one with a willing partner. See what works for you, see how it works, and see how you can help bring more value to you as well here. It's important to realize that the companies that standardize their data now will be better positioned to use AI later. So really, overall, the ask is simple. Get involved, right? Start looking at these standards. Start planning for adoption. Talking to your team, to your partners about these standards and whether or not they plan to take these to adopt these standards as well here. And probably one of my last asks is going to really go and take a look at these standards. So visit DSDC at nmfta.org. I'm sorry, dsdc.nmfta.org. I wasn't calling out an email address there. And it'll go through what standards are available for you today here. I'll admit we're still working through some of the APIs themselves and working on getting them available. A lot of work, as I said, has gone in. A lot of people have volunteered a lot of time to build out the schema that is out there. That work is still underway, but we still need more participation and more adoption. So bring your operational expertise if you want to get involved. Ask your providers about their roadmap and look for pilot opportunities. Keep in mind, the DSDC is not just about creating API standards. We're helping the industry create a common digital language overall. That common language reduces friction today, supports real-time operations tomorrow, and lays the foundation for AI-driven logistics in the future. But that value only comes to all of us if the industry adopts it. And this is not technology for technology's sake. It's about removing that friction from the freight process. EDI helps standardize transactions. APIs will help standardize real-time transactions and get us to the point where we have consistent data across the entire shipment process in order to go to the next level, which could be AI driven or even what's beyond that here. Adoption is where these standards become real for us here. So with that being said, I'll take any questions. Feel free to reach out right now with any questions. I'm happy to answer them. Or you can email, as Anthony pointed out before, and I'm sure any questions he'll bring up to me so I can help answer anything.
Thank you, Keith. I appreciate it. And I did just get reminded of something. I believe I don't think I mentioned this at the start, but if you're watching this recording and you have a question, even though you excuse me, even though this event has concluded, you're still able to send us questions whenever you think of them. And I'll make sure to, loop Keith in there in the easiest way possible to get you an answer. Or if you just want more information, feel free to reach out to us, even though it's after the conclusion of the event. That goes for putting comments in LinkedIn and YouTube as well. So with that said, Keith, a lot of great information there. One thing that stood out to me towards the end there was, about the next steps. And you talked about, kind of an easy way to get started might be to just pilot something after you brainstorm it for a little bit, pilot one with a willing partner and see how it works out and how it can bring more value. And just kind of maybe I don't want to say experiment, but maybe see, what works, what you could, do better in the future, or what you forgot when you were brainstorming. Is there anything, could you talk a little bit more about that? Maybe give an example without dropping any names.
You know what? I'm not even afraid to drop some names. I don't think they'd mind. So on the LTL side, there's many carriers that have already adopted like EBOL and are working to start adopting the others. So if you're a partner with one of those carriers, don't be afraid to reach out to them and ask them, hey, what can I do to pilot this connection with you, right? For 3PLs, somebody like C.H. Robinson has been a big advocate of adoption for these. EBOL being one of their main ones here. They have a lot of transactions every day using the EBOL standard that they helped produce, actually. So please don't be afraid to reach out to them. And that's a great first step as you're kind of working on planning this out here. Start talking to them about, hey, I'm interested in this standard here that I see that you've adopted here. What can I do to make that connection with you? On the full truckload side, JB Hunt has been a big advocate as well. And I think it's important to point out that when JB Hunt came to us and the full truckload people came to us, they brought along the Scheduling Standards Consortium standard that they had already created. So if anybody's heard of the SSC, there's a lot of partners that have adopted the scheduling standards, and JB Hunt, I believe, has adopted EBOL as well here. So there are a lot of people that you can reach out to, or you can reach out to me and I'll help point you in the right direction in order to start talking to people about these standards and actually making these connections here when you're ready to go ahead and start doing it here and executing on that. So, yeah.
Thanks, Keith. I appreciate it. So one question we had come in just now was about the point about how you mentioned those who standardize now will be in a better position later, especially with AI coming down the line. Could you talk a little bit more about what you've seen there and maybe, some examples of how you've seen standardization already benefit with some, current AI or early AI adoption?
Sure. So, what I see, and again, I always go back to with AI, what's important is to have good, consistent data. AI can do a lot to clean up that data for you, is what I've been seeing, but you more want it to be able to, really analyze it and possibly suggest some, some different directions or strategic directions going forward here. So that's why it's so important to not just the APIs themselves, but as we're working to try to standardize some of the common terminology as well, right? So anybody that's been involved in rolling out or trying to make a connection with a partner through API, there's a process where you map out fields, right? So it's, hey, I have this address field. What do you have? What does that map to for you, right? And while it's absolutely been needed, that's one of the main things we want to cut out so that it's the same information across the entire process. And once you have that data, that's when AI can really take it, analyze it, and do things with it. And I think some of the things I mentioned in there, is where you start looking at it for, um, sorry, possibly pointing out, exceptions ahead of time. Hey, this could be in trouble. I saw an article, a blog from, I think, from C.H. Robinson the other day, and Greg West was involved in it, where he was talking about how they've been using it to look for exceptions, ahead of time and start taking action on it, taking agents take action on it that much quicker here so that they can adjust on the fly here. And that's where it really gets important, and it pulls it back even to API interactions, which, well, I mean, I've been around transportation, I feel like my whole life, right? And I remember when EDI really started making it big, and all of a sudden, hey, every night I'm getting a dump of loads from our largest customer, which was great. We didn't have to input those things, right? Now with APIs, it's not just scheduled transactions anymore, it's real time, and adjusting on the fly to changes. And that's exactly the way this industry has already been headed for a while. And we're just trying to bring some standardization to it so that we're set now, but also for in the future as AI continues to grow, whatever may be beyond that. There.
Thank you, Keith. I appreciate that. Maybe that's a great segue. I like that. Do you want to wrap up with a little bit of an outlook on what you think is to come? You talk about how,
Mm-hmm.
it's almost a bit of a natural progression where we're going and the goal of this. You also talked about this is how we set up a foundation for the future, which is something, it's hard to put a price on that and think about the things you have to do now to benefit in the future. But could you talk about what you see coming down the line, or what you're maybe hopeful for, something to stay on the lookout for, Keith?
Yeah. So, this whole process, I mean, some of the basic ROIs on it is, making those connections faster. I come from a pro services world, so I always think time to value, right? So once we have this in place, it just starts looking out more and more into the future, so that once you have this data and we're on the standards, you can easily get that data yourself, and use it appropriately. So as AI continues to grow within our industry, but even beyond AI, it's more about being able to change and adjust your operations efficiently and quickly according to what's happening now here. Anybody that's involved in transportation knows that next email, right, message, then could be a driver getting held up in traffic, right? And instead of having several phone calls to reschedule an appointment, right? Going to miss a pickup, or reschedule an appointment, going to have to do it tomorrow. How does that affect things down the line? By having all this really kind of standardized and a completely digital process, it starts ticking off what's the next action. Okay, this changed. What has to change now, right? And really starts handling that in a quick and digital way, so that, instead of possibly an hour of trying to reset an appointment, it's continuous and it's instantaneous. So that's really my long out version of it here, my way out version of it here. But being able to handle these changes and and instead the people really working on the things that really need to be worked on instead of making a call just to change an appointment. I think that's going to be one of the main benefits of this in the long term here, Anthony.
Thank you, Keith. Well, I look forward to it. It's a hopeful outlook. So I'm glad to hear that. And with that, Keith, where can people find you if they want to learn more? I'm bringing back the slide with the website information.
Yeah, so dsdc.nmfta.org, or even if you just go to nmfta.org, you'll be able to see our standards and look into DSDC there. So you'll get information on where we're at on our standards, what's available. You can even go in and download PRDs, and for the ones that are available, the actual YAML itself here. Keeping in mind that YAML is really, it's a guide on how to create these here. So yeah, please, we enjoy interaction on it here, and we really support the industry as a whole putting their thoughts and feedback into this here, because we don't want to do it in a vacuum, right? We want to make sure it's something that can really bring value to the industry. So.
Thank you, Keith. I appreciate that. And everyone, yep, make sure you check out dsdc.nmfta.org. And if you have any questions or comments after the session today, again, please feel free to put them in the LinkedIn comments, the YouTube comments, or email us at education@tianet.org. With that brings us to a close today. Keith, really appreciate your time. That was a great conversation. Look forward to the next one, and we will catch you. Thank you, everyone, for your attendance today.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, Keith. Thanks. Take care. Bye-bye.